through your relationship with Charlie and vice versa?
I think it sounds really cringy, but it's that whole like don't judge a book by its cover, but it's also kind of don't judge something by just what you know. So obviously, because I hadn't really been exposed to disability or anyone with a physical disability who uses a wheelchair or anything like that, I didn't really know what to expect, and I only had the stereotypes from the representation in media, which is obviously so little and so what's the word? I don't know, but it's not a fair representation, or accurate representation. I don't think it's very limited. But when I was asking him questions, because at the start of our relationship, when we started texting, we basically said, let's just ask each other questions. And I said, if I ask anything that's offensive or that you don't want to answer, don't answer it. Tell me I'm being rude. But it's something I'd never been exposed to. So I just asked him and let myself learn from him and from what your disability was, because obviously it's different for everyone as well anyway. And didn't let myself try and understand it from the stereotype. So, I wouldn't just think, oh, cerebral palsy means he can't do this, this and this, because that's what I've heard from a stereotype or from someone else with cerebral palsy, because your cerebral palsy could be completely different.
Yeah.
And it's definitely kind of just, I don't know, like, they say first impressions count, but I don't think they count for everything. It's important to make a good first impression, but you can't judge someone on 5 minutes. We spoke for months before we even decided to meet each other. We'd spoken for ages and we got to know each other. And I think, why just don't judge something by a stereotype that let yourself learn and be open to learning about someone, not about a stereotype, if that even makes sense.
I think for me, I think the biggest takeaway really learning wise was just, I think people when you go into a relationship as a disabled individual, you've got to get over that hurdle of, oh, but they might not like this, or this might make them feel uncomfortable. Because at the end of the day, obviously this is only my point of view, but I always go into a relationship with the goal of it being a long-term relationship and it sort of being that person. So I think you've got to go with, look, I'm going to just be me, and if you don't like it, we're gonna sort of experience that together, and don't be shy about things that you need support with or help with. Just try and explain to them why and how best to help you, because then they're going to be able to get a better understanding, and it's going to feel as well for you like a big weight's been lifted, because if they are comfortable with it and they're okay with it, then job done, you move on.
Yeah, I think obviously that does take time in any relationship, no matter what, even just exposing like myself, my true self, not my, the self that I want to show.
You is weird.
Is
you're probably weird.
I am weird, but you're weird too. But yeah, you have just kind of got to go, you know what, you're gonna find this out or see this at some point. And obviously you can, when you're in the place in the relationship to kind of start revealing or start bringing out those things, but you have got to be, I think, just a bit more confident with it.
And I think that's something I've learned over time. I mean, Gina seen me at the good, the bad, the ugly, but obviously initially you kind of, you do, everyone tries to keep it that sunshine and rainbows, everything's fine, I'm absolutely fine.
Which I do think is absolutely fine at the start of a relationship when you're trying to kind of establish that relationship, but there is going to be a point where if you want them to like you, then they're going to have to like you. There's no point in pretending to be this fake person, this perfect person that is ticks all their boxes, because if that's not you that they're liking, you're becoming their perfect, and then you've just got to be fake for the rest of that relationship, and at some point that's going to break, and then you might actually fall for this person, but they're not going to fall for you, they're going to fall for the fake version of you.
And I think as well, it brought another thing that sort of came out of it was it brought out a lot more confidence. Obviously, Nadal knows I run a personal brand where I'm always in front of camera and taking pictures and doing different stuff. And I think initially I was still quite nervy about doing it. I was definitely getting more and more confident as time went on. But once obviously me and Gina met and things got a little bit more serious and you started helping out with YouTube, I got a bit more cocksure, if that's all right. So I think that's also been a sort of weird byproduct.
I think that's the thing though, when you find someone that accepts you for you with all of your flaws or all of your differences, and the things that make you, then you become more confident in you because you're like, well, this person accepts all of it, so why shouldn't I?
There's also always that ignorance. I think most disabled people get like, you thought I couldn't get a girlfriend or a boyfriend. So yeah, there's that as well.
That confidence. Yeah.
But anyway, I think we've answered that question to death.
Yeah. I think we answered the question. I don't know. We just chatted.
What did you like or love about football with each other?
What did we initially like about each other? Yeah. Well, you go first. What do you want to think about it?
Yeah, that's an initial.
That is an interesting one. I think we just. Oh my god! I nearly said something then that sounds so cringy and scripted. We just clicked.
No, I
just knew.
I think. I quite liked your geeky side. Gina's got quite a big geeky side when it comes to sort of Disney. And I think, I don't know why, normally that wouldn't be a thing that
I'm very geeky when it comes to, I like knowing something. So if I mean, when we first went to Birmingham, you probably got sick to death. Even now, I'd probably take him to Birmingham and go, that's that place and that's that place, and did you know that used to be that, or did you know? Because I just like, I am a bit of an attention seeker, so you know, I like being able to kind of show off and say this geeky because I'm like, I know this. And I think for you, I don't know. I was going to say,
I've always been more confident over, I think this goes for a lot of people, more confident over text and over the phone, because obviously you haven't got that initial, before I sort of started doing YouTube and stuff, you haven't got that initial, oh, he's in a wheelchair, and that's, so I think that's where that confidence comes from.
I think you were just easy to talk to, and you kind of just understood and you listened, and you kind of just, the dog's dragging, you went along with the conversation. You didn't try, if you weren't interested, you don't care that much about Disney, but you didn't shut me down. Like, you listened and you let me talk about Disney.
And then I think as much as some people would see this as a negative, I can't, obviously this wasn't probably not an initial thing, but your mum's like your like
my
caring mum side, that kind of work. I think that kind of works for me personally. It works because obviously with needing support with getting around and sort of
makes it sound like I dated you so that I could mother you.
No, that's not what I meant. But
that's what attracted me to it.
That's not what I meant. You're twisting my words. But obviously, like the caring aspect to things, particularly for disabled individuals, a big part of it, and I think that helped sort of break the ice with sort of exposing the more vulnerable side of things, and I think that was a big bonus for me.
I always want to help. I always want to do something, if anything, to just help. I am a bit of a caring person, but I am also a very motherly person. Like, can be annoying sometimes because I just act like a mum, and it's like, Gina,
but then
you're 21.
I don't know. That's a really tough. That's a really tough question.
It is thinking back to it
because, obviously, where we didn't meet in person for the first 2 months, we mainly text. I think we used to FaceTime.
Yeah, we started to FaceTime after a few weeks.
But I don't think we did that. I think we only did that a couple of times before we actually met.
Met in person, yeah. Anyway, I think.
Yeah, I think we've answered
that question before we
Yeah.
get too soppy.
But no, I didn't think I'd have to think about that much.
Thanks.
No, but like, it's hard because we didn't meet in person. So.
I thought that was a question.
But yeah, anyway, we'll let Nadal ask the next question.
What assumptions or annoying questions do people ask you the most about your relationship?
Are you brother and sister?
Yeah, that's the first one. All the time. Both Ginger, yeah, your brother and sister.
I always say as well, I do think that it's a lot easier for people to assume, oh, his sister's out with him, or, you know, he's as a disabled person, you're out with your sister. You're not. Yeah. It's easier to think, oh, they've got a sister.
It's like that
they've got a girlfriend.
It's like that whole scenario. Oh, take your younger brother out. It's like that.
And I think that is easier. So when people see us together, obviously, if you see two gingers together, you would probably or two people that look alike, you immediately think they're brother and sister anyway. But I think even more so because we're both ginger and because you're in a wheelchair, people just immediately think that's their first response. And I think even if we weren't both ginger, people would probably think that.
Yeah. The other assumption is often that Gina's my carer, or the one I hate and you hate as well is the whole I'm a booby prize thing, because that's that.
Oh, don't get me started on that rant.
That comes up a lot. If they're like, "Oh, thank you," and
I think the thing is people. Whenever you kind of say that your boyfriend's got a disability, or once they get to know you, so this kind of happened a bit with my colleagues, because when you say, oh, my boyfriend's got a disability, they're just like, oh, right, okay. But then as soon as you start to talk about your relationship, they're kind of like, oh, so when you met, did you kind of debate whether you would carry on with the relationship? Did you think, oh, maybe we'll just leave this one? Or, all those kind of questions that's like, I don't need your sympathy. And this wasn't, I'm going to have to get the dog in a minute because she's growling at the door. But they didn't think, what was I trying to say? Yeah, I don't need your sympathy. This wasn't a sympathetic choice. This is a two-way relationship. He gives a lot to the relationship and I give a lot to the relationship. And, with anyone, you take on that kind of care and love for that person, no matter what that includes. And if that includes me helping you put your shoes on or helping you into bed sometimes or whatever else, then that's what that means. And there could be things like this way around. I mean, you helped me a lot with my mental health, and especially because I've moved away from my parents, sometimes obviously homesickness, and you help with that and you take that on board as part of the relationship and as part of me.
And I think obviously there's the obvious ones of everyone asks the sort of intimate questions of can you have kids, them ones.
Or I think some people obviously they don't know whether it's hereditary, which cerebral palsy isn't hereditary, and I think people think oh, are you kind of bothered at the fact that it could happen to your children? To me, more than to Charlie, because I've made this sacrifice to be with him and have this possibility of our children my children, my future being damaged. No, I'm not worried about that. And if anything happened to our children, then we would deal with it the same way anybody else would.
If anything,
of course it would be a struggle, but we'd have more equipment, so it's fine. But I made this decision because I wanted to be with him and because I loved Soppy, because I loved Charlie as a person. And I see my future with you no matter what happens. I haven't made a sacrifice.
And I think that's probably the biggest one we get is that whole sacrifice. Oh, thank you. And it's like
as if being with you is a burden to me.
And then I think the other thing is obviously people, particularly in situations like if we're at the pub, not so much now with COVID, but if we're at the pub or we're going to a club or something like that, that's when also we get some assumptions made of just how, I think it's more the curiosity of how the hell does that work?
Yeah, how does our relationship work? Like, I think people just think it must work completely different to a different relationship, and it's like, no, it doesn't. Perhaps, obviously, people have different disabilities. Charlie's a little bit more independent than perhaps other people, but yeah, there is possibility in particularly some relationships that there is more care involved. But other than that, it's just a relationship. It just works the same way any other relationship does.
I think as well, the other thing to remember is like no two relationships are the same. So like stop trying to peg us in one hole when Darren, Lauren and Sheila's relationship are completely different. Yeah. Why I chose Sheila, I have no idea, but we're going to go with it. But I think that's another big thing to consider is why are we any different to anyone else? Because their relationship's different to what our relationship's like, and it's why it works any way you kind of look at it. Yeah, I think assumption wise the main ones the
sister and a burden.
Yeah,
basically.
Burden, yeah.
I've come to be on the podcast. I'm a vital part of Charlie and Gina's relationship. I annoy them and take up half the bed.
Yep. All right, next question.
Any advice that you can give who would like to start dating but scared to go on a date because they have got a disability or vice versa? They scared to date someone with a disability?
I
think one thing I just want to say straight away is that disclose your disability before the date.
Yeah.
Because I think I think the thing is, as much as I would be like, okay, that's fine and carry on with the date, for a lot of people, it's almost a bit like, why did you not disclose this to me? And it can almost feel a little bit like you would have been lying to me, and the trust isn't there. So not just because they might be put off by your disability, which they shouldn't be, but because that trust will have fallen, and that can put someone off.
Yeah.
So I think from the other side of it, if someone discloses to you that they have a disability, as I said, don't just judge that by what you know. Get to know them, get to know their disability, and then you can make a decision based on them as a person, not on them as a disability. I don't think it's fair to judge anyone by anything, by their upbringing, by their background, by their ability, by their health, gender, anything. You need to know that person for who they are. You know, you could make 100 assumptions about me being from Birmingham, but which
we do.
You do.
I think the on that subject is that whole thing of it's that whole thing of it's an ism. It's a disabilityism, racism. It's that whole thing of it's what's the word I'm looking for? Obviously, the aim of society is to accept everyone, and I think you've got to go in, if you're the able-bodied person going into that relationship, you've got to go in with an open mind, and I think that's going to serve you well, because then you're going to be able to make it sounds really formal, but a more informed decision on whether you want to carry on that relationship or not.
Yeah, and that would be the same with anyone. You get to know them, and then you make a decision based on how you know them, not how they look. Just because someone's attractive, they could be an absolute arse, or they could be the most boring person you've ever met. And you know that goes for anybody. So why would you make a different exception just because that person has a disability?
Yeah, I think, and also on the other side, you've got you've sort of got to go into that first date or that first conversation as a disabled person, try and go in as an open book, because they probably are going to have a million questions. You're probably going to feel like you're being interrogated, but it gets that bit out of the way. And also, if you can add a bit of comedy, light-hearted friendliness to it, it's going to put them at ease, and it's going to make the date go a lot smoother for you, because you're going to be nervous as well, and it's going to make them feel a lot more at ease, and hopefully that puts you in a really good stead for obviously building that relationship, hopefully. And I think
sorry, I was going to say, I think one thing that worked really well for us at the start of the relationship, and I always mention this because I do just think it works well anyway in any relationship, but we kind of took it in terms to ask questions, so that I wasn't asking you loads of questions about your disability, but that I could ask you questions about your disability without it feeling like I was bombarding you or being rude. And then you kind of get that natural kind of conversation. And I think if you're going in as someone who hasn't got a disability, and you're going on a date with someone who has, then say to them, I want to ask some questions. I want to ask you some questions. I want to get to know you and your disability, but I also want you to get to know me. And to be fair, you don't even need to separate you and your disability. You're getting to know them. Their disability is part of them. And I think if you're going in with someone as someone with a disability, then you need to kind of be prepared and be open, as Charlie says, to them asking those questions. And if something is offensive or is genuinely rude, then let them know and say it. Obviously, don't. I think unless what they say is really, really rude, just say, actually, I prefer this, and this because this makes me feel like this, or I associate that with that. But yeah, try not to. If they do ask a really stupid question, say, "Oh, I get asked that one all the time," but don't be offended by it, because, as Charlie says, that could be the first time that they're ever asking someone that question.
And also, you don't want to close them off to you. So you don't want to be trying to get to know someone, and because you've responded in that certain way, it's going to close that door, and they're going to feel quite on edge about the rest of the questions they might have, or the rest of the conversation you're going to have. Obviously, the other thing as well is, obviously, as the disabled person, you don't want the whole of the evening being, so tell me about your disability.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can. I think that's the other thing as well. If you're the able-bodied person and you do have a million questions, someone break them up.
Yeah.
Don't just sit there and.
Well, lead on from your questions, because you're not necessarily going to ask me a question about my ability, but
Can you run?
Say, you might say, I don't know, how many boyfriends have you had, or what's your favorite color, or what TV shows do you like, and respond with that question, so that they can tell, you can still get to know them as a person. You're not just asking them about their disability, but it just means that you can filter in those questions about disability without it being an interrogation or uncomfortable, or like you have to know that person for their disability, and for them you can learn it all in daily life. And as a child, every day you're going to know that person for what they do and what they experience every day.
And I think that's the other thing. As much as it puts a lot of pressure on the disabled individual, I think the best bit of advice I can give for going into your first date, or you going online dating, is you just got to be unapologetically you, but also quite confident. Because at the end of the day, you're putting yourself out there when Joe Bloggs, who's able-bodied, got a normal job, and hasn't faced half the challenges you've faced, isn't putting himself out there. And I think you've got to take confidence from that and say, look, I'm doing something that most of the disabled population aren't comfortable with. But then you never know what could happen from it until you do it. So it's a really hard one.
And if you start to get to that point where you feel like, well, this isn't going anywhere and everyone's shutting me down because of my disability, come away from it.
Yeah.
Don't force yourself to go on dating apps, go on dating sites and spend all evening scrolling through possible profiles and trying to decide whether you might like that person or not, because you're just going to put yourself in a hole that's really difficult to get out of. If you start to feel like that, come away from it, and then you never know, you might get someone who messages you first or asks you a question, or you can always go back to it.
I think don't spend too long in that sort of mindset of, oh, must get a girl. And I think that's the big thing, is there's that element of must have a girlfriend, must have a boyfriend. I think you just got to just let what will be at times. Obviously, I'm all for going for what you want and like chasing that, but then it comes to a point where you're just going to tire yourself out and you're going to just put yourself down. And I think that's the other thing it might be worth being aware of, is particularly for myself, and I think this goes for a lot of the table community, where obviously we're exposed to different stuff a lot of the time earlier on in our lives. If you have your condition from early on or born with it, is we grow up a lot quicker. And I think that
mature.
Yeah, we mature a lot quicker in terms of, and I think that can have a knock-on effect when you're dating, because obviously I might act as if I'm 25 because I've had to grow up and deal with all this stuff, whereas so I'm only 21, and then an average 21-year-old doesn't have the views that I have. So I think that's the other thing, is be aware of who you are, and I think that also that's a big thing as well for people in their 20s or slightly younger, is there's that thing of like, oh, I can't date someone that's 3 years older than me. And I think that's something maybe we need to start moving past, because you'll probably find that you might connect with them a little bit more. Obviously that's not guaranteed, it's just something maybe to be aware of, and it might be something that might help you.
Yeah, the thing is, and this is going to sound like cringing, I know everyone probably says it, but you can't expect someone else to like you or fall in love with you when you don't love yourself. And loving yourself is incredibly hard, and it's not something that you have to do every day, and it's not something that you will feel every day or every minute of the day. But if you're getting to a point where you're starting to feel like you hate yourself, you hate your disability, you hate who you are, and you want to become someone else just to get that date, then you need to step away from it and do things that you enjoy and do things that make you feel happy and confident. Because what, as I said before, what's the point? You're showing someone this fake person and letting them fall in love with that when that's not you. And you know, you don't want to spend your whole life pretending to be something you're not, because that gets exhausting, and then you're hiding away from the things that you actually enjoy and actually make you happy. So yeah, if you're getting overwhelmed by it, I would just say take a step back and go and do something that you enjoy, no matter what that is, and no matter what people think of that. You know, I'll go and watch a Disney film, people might think I'm childish, but that's what makes me happy, and that's what I enjoy. You'd go and play PS4 for a bit, and some people might think, oh, that's stupid, that's silly gaming. But that's what makes you happy, and that's what kind of calms you down. So you've got to do stuff for you in this whole process. Do it for you.
And I think as well, the other thing for it works both ways, because what I was thinking was, be open to trying out different stuff as well. Obviously, when you go into the dating scene, and obviously not that sort of stuff. This isn't this isn't the time or the place. Right, you completely knocked me off now.
If there's something that you come across that you haven't tried.
Now, hold on. Right, so this is where I was going. So as the disabled individual, don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone, because if you're obviously dating an able-bodied person, they might ask you to try out something that you've not necessarily done before on a date, and you're like, oh, I don't know, try it, see if it works, see if you can work around it. And then on the flip side, with the able-bodied person, is be open to asking them, okay, this is what I was thinking of doing, how would this best work for you, and how can we do this together? And I think that as well, you'll start developing your trust with each other and your understanding, and also it's going to make the disabled individual feel a lot better, because they're obviously going to be I hate it because it sounds like a bloody teacher, but they're going to be included. And also it's quite nice to see that you're considering that and you're starting to adapt with what they need to sort of work around, but then you're also not shutting the idea down completely. Like I think that's the other thing as well, is there's often a stereotype that we can't travel, we can't do these things, where no, we just have to do them differently, and being open to going, okay, how can we work this out, how can we do this? And I think that's a good mentality to have for both sides. One being an open book on the disability front, in terms of try it, if it don't work, fine, no one died.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, be open in terms of understanding what that person need to be able to try out that thing. I think,
Yeah.
I think we answered the question. Went on for a bit, but we answered the question.
And that's it.
Perfect.
Yay.
Yay. Hopefully,
Nice talking
I
to
think
you.
we waffled.
Enjoyed our conversations.
but you might have to try again.
Yeah,
I
you
think
cut
we
out a little
cut out
bit
a
then.
Really nice to talking to you both and enjoyed our conversations.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
good.
it was good.
It was good to chat.
And I
We
think-
have a tendency to waffle, both of us, so
Yeah.
sorry about that.
But then also some of the questions I don't think I've ever sat and actually thought about.
No.
So that was good. Yeah, and I think the other thing, I say the other thing as well.
The other thing that I feel
the
like
other thing.
The other thing.
The thing. I think the thing to Dave, you done it again. Yeah. Don't worry, this is gone. But yeah.
Mum, what's in the background?
Anything you want to promote?
Obviously, the BBC 3 article was a good read for anyone wanting to sort of.
Yeah, dating and disability. I think Nadal will be able to find that and link
Yeah.
that. Obviously, our Instagram, your Instagram technically at NQPC, we talk a lot on there about, you know, day-to-day life and real life with the disability and our relationship.
And obviously, and I think as well, the other thing to say is if anyone does want any advice that I can try offer, I'm happy for them to DM me and me try and sort of help them through, because I think it's always good to have that person to sort of bounce ideas off of, and sort of have that person that's been there, done that, got the t-shirts. I think that's one thing.
If you want to speak to me, then I'm in his DMs anyway.
Yeah.
So
you might get Gina or you might get me.
Not because I'm obsessed and worried about him, just because I do his Instagram stuff.
No, you don't do all of it.
Not all of it. I just do some of it as well. I contribute.
I'm just the face.
I'm the manager.
Yeah, okay. But yeah.
Brand manager.
Yeah.